Congratulations to your new world. This is my office. You might know some of those folks. If not, you might get to know them. This is what we do. The majority of our business, about 80% of what we do, is as municipal advisors, advisors to counties in conjunction with municipal bonding. We do some studies, we do some underwriting work, and we purchase bonds as well, but 80% of what we do is as municipal advisors. Most of you, many of you might think debt is a four-letter word. It is. Years ago, this is probably 18 years ago, I was asked by the mayor of Laburkan down here to come down and discuss financing of some new roads. They had some dirt roads they wanted to pave. And it was a public hearing, and I came down and the place was packed. And the mayor wanted the public's input first, so the first person up at the podium opened a folder and opened his Ensign magazine and quoted about debt. They should avoid debt. And it all went downhill from there. I was never asked to speak, actually. And so I left and came back to the old airport here, and I saw an old friend of mine, a neighbor, who's Keith McMullen, who used to be in the presiding bishopric of the LDS Church at the time, and he asked me what I was doing. I told him I was a public finance banker financing public projects, and he said, "Oh, I need to speak with you about doing a project in Laie, Hawaii. We need new sewer systems there." And I said, "I could have used you about an hour ago." Debt is a four-letter word. Yeah, I will use the microphone. Debt is a four-letter word, and debt is powerful, but like anything that's powerful, like fire and sex, it can be used for good or it can be used to destroy. So debt is a tool, and you need to learn how to use it wisely. Debt in the United States, municipal debt, is built upon the models of Europe, and debt's been around for a long time in these United States. You can see in 1902 it was already a $2.1 billion annual industry. More recently, that 3.7 trillion figure in 2011 is about what it is today. It hasn't grown much since 2011. So about $3.7 trillion in municipal debt, state and local government debt. The first bond to be issued in the United States was in 1812. It was for a canal in New York. New York's the first at everything in the world of finance. And they financed a canal, and it paid off. Pretty much every level of government borrows in the U.S., and you know that. But every type of district and county and city and state and entity, you can see some of them here, are allowed to issue debt under state and local charters and national charters. This is who issued debt in Utah. This is the last full year of data. It's almost a year old now. I'll update this in January with 2014, but IPA, biggest issuer debt. Most of this debt that you see here from 2013 was actually refunding of previously issued debt at newer and lower interest rates. So those are the top 10 in 2013 and their par amounts. Who buys bonds? Mainly it's households. That big purple bar at the bottom is households, high net worth individuals, people edging toward retirement. If you go to a personal financial advisor, you have heard them say, take the number 100, subtract your age from it, and the remainder is what you ought to have invested in the stock market, and the inverse is what you ought to have invested in fixed incomes. So the older you get, the more you move out of the stock market and into municipal bonds or fixed income securities. Anyone know the reason for that? We got some finance people in here, don't we? You have less time in your life to write out the vagaries of the stock market. Stock market might be up 20% one year and down 20% another year. On average, since its inception, the average return in the stock market has been 11% a year. So if you just invested in the stock market since its inception, you would have earned 11% a year. In the municipal bond market, those buying bonds earn about 5%, but it's a more stable, reliable stream of income. Any questions yet? Okay. These are the different types of debt. I don't know if you can see that. You probably can't read it. Different types of debt that are available to local governments and counties. The top line says general obligation bonds. The second line says revenue bonds. The third line says excise tax revenue bonds. The next line says lease revenue bonds, and then tax increment bond, and then special assessment bonds. In reality, you could classify those into really two types. The first line, which is general obligation bonds, and everything else is kind of a type of a revenue bond. And the difference between them is what is offered as collateral security for the buyer of the bond. In a general obligation bond, anyone want to venture a guess what the security is? Oh, come on, guess. You're elected officials. Yeah, property taxes. That's exactly right. And in a very real sense, every piece of property within the county that's got a taxable value, anything with taxable value on it, is pledged for the repayment of the bonds in a very real sense. And let me just give you the extreme example that I like to use. Let's say that, Adam, where do you live? In Salt Lake County. Let's say Salt Lake County issues a general obligation bond. What they've pledged to the buyers of that bond is they pledge that they will raise the property tax to whatever it needs to be to repay the bond. So in our example where the counties issued that bond and made that covenant, and let's say a nuclear explosion goes off in Salt Lake Valley and every parcel of property in the valley is now worthless because it's radioactive except Adam's, because he has had the foresight to build this bubble over his property, and it has somehow resisted the radiation. So Adam's place is the only thing that grows anything and sustains life. It's the only piece of property with value in it. The county has pledged to raise taxes on all properties with taxable value to whatever they need to be to repay that debt. So in that case, Adam's going to get the bill for the entire amount because his is the only piece of property with taxable value on it. Now, Adam probably won't be able to repay that bond issue, and so he will not pay his property taxes, and if he doesn't pay his property taxes for 5 years, guess what happens? The county forecloses his property, takes it away from him, and sells it, and gives the proceeds to the holders of the bonds. In a very real sense, everybody's property, businesses and residents that are taxable value, act as a pledge for the repayment of that bond. That's why under Utah law you can't issue a general obligation bond unless you take it to the voters and ask for their permission. And they have to give you the permission to do it with a simple majority. Now any questions? Yes?
Do counties or cities issue more than one general obligation bond on their citizens?
Oh yeah. Yes. There's a limit under state law as far as what the taxing authority is for counties, and it's related. It's tied as a percentage to your fair market value, your taxable value. At the state level, they have the same thing. They have a limit of 1.5% of the state's fair market value. The state actually issues general obligation bonds, but they've never levied a tax, a property tax, on anyone. They pay it with other revenues, which you can do. That's a good point. You can always separate here what you're pledging as security from what you're using as the repayment of the bonds. They don't have to be the same thing. So you can pledge a property tax but not use a property tax to repay the bond. You can use a sales tax or a franchise tax or some other source of revenues to repay the bond. Everything else other than general obligation bonds can be classified as a revenue bond of some sort. And a revenue bond is limited in its pledge to a specific stream of revenues. That's the only thing the bond buyer gets, is they get the right to take that revenue stream if you don't pay them. So if it's a sales tax revenue bond, they have first right to collect your sales tax, pay themselves first, and give the rest to you. If it's a water or sewer bond issue, which I don't think any of you have, that's the stream that's taken. So all of the others are a special type of revenue bond. And I wanted to show you under the state constitution, the bolded language here, counties, debt of counties, no debt in excess of the taxes of the current year unless it goes to a vote of the people. And here's another provision in the Constitution, no debt secured by property taxes unless the proposition goes to a vote of the people. It's constitutional. So it's actually illegal in Utah to issue any other kind of debt unless you take the general obligation or the property tax voted debt to the voters, but you can't issue any other type of debt unless it's secured by a specific revenue stream or unless it's subject to an annual appropriation where every year the governing body, the county council or the county commission, gets to decide every year whether they're going to make that payment or not. That's legal because it doesn't carry over from one fiscal year to the other. You can't bind a future council or commission unless it goes to the vote of the people or unless you're pledging just a specific revenue stream that the legislature has given you authorization to use. I wanted to show you the participants in a bond issue. There's you as the issuer in green at the top, an underwriter in purple. Underwriters are the folks that you see on TV that have 3 phones going at the same time, sitting before a bank of computers. An underwriter buys your bonds and immediately tries to resell them at a higher price. So that's an important thing to remember. You'll have a financial advisor, now known as a municipal advisor. It's a financial advisor for municipalities. They just changed the name a couple of years ago. A financial advisor sits on your side of the table. You can view them as an extension of the county, almost like a county employee, but they're on contract with you to help you through the bonding process and to hold your hand and make sure you get the best deal that you can possibly get. A financial advisor or a municipal advisor has a fiduciary duty to you to act in your best interest. And the regulators are encouraging all of you to use municipal advisors. An underwriter doesn't necessarily have that same, well, they don't have that same fiduciary duty to you. In fact, their interest is adverse to yours to some degree because they make money by buying your bonds at a lower price and reselling them at a higher price. And you have to remember that in the municipal bond market, okay, I don't want to lose you all. I'm getting too technical here. In the municipal bond market, think of it as a teeter-totter where price is inversely related to interest rate. When you issue debt, what do you want? As the county, you want the interest rate to be as low as possible. That's the big cost in a bond issue, is the interest cost. So you want the teeter-totter to be like this, which means you want to sell the bonds at as high a price as possible to the underwriter. But if you do that, the underwriter has nowhere to go to make any money. Because remember, he tries to sell your bonds buy your bonds at this price and resell them at this price. So his interest is not aligned with yours, and it's logical and reasonable for you to pay the underwriter something to act in his capacity, but how much is the question, and that's what a municipal advisor can help you with, determine how much you should buy. Yes?
Give us some names of some of the popular common underwriters you like any of them better than others.
Here they are. This is the top 10 in the U.S. for 2013, and this is their market share in the market. All of these firms cover Utah, some of them better than others. Locally, we have representatives from Wells Fargo, from RBC, and from George K. Baum and Company working in Utah. Those are the three underwriters located in Utah. The rest of these firms cover Utah from another state, and they'll have bankers fly in. So, does that answer the question? You know what? As a municipal advisor, my job is to not get too cozy with any of them, because I want to use whoever is going to get you the best deal at the time, and that changes. Sometimes one underwriter will be really heavy in their portfolio with a certain type of paper, and you'd be silly to use them. It would be ridiculous because they're not going to give you the best price because they already have enough in their portfolio of what you're selling. So I look for the hungry underwriter. There are some that I like better than others, but I'm not going to tell you who. Yeah. But it does depend on the day. A certain day, a certain underwriter will be hungry, and you can tell. And I like to make them compete. I think it's ridiculous for anyone to hire a team of a financial advisor and an underwriter who are close friends and do a lot together. That's not in your best interest. And so you want a financial advisor that's going to make these guys compete. These are the FA firms, the financial advisor firms in the United States and their rankings. Zions has several sister companies that Zions owns, but we let them do business under different names in different states. In California, we're known as KNN. In Nevada, we used to be known as Nevada State Bank Public Finance. They've just changed their name to Zions. But if you combine all of our offices, we're the number 6th in the nation in terms of par amount of bonds that we help with. You need a bond attorney, yes.
Sorry,
You're fine. This is good.
financial advisors, is it worth the fee that we pay, and typically how much do they pay, and do they really get you the savings that will benefit you at the end?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will first point out that all of the new regulations that have been coming out in the last 2 or 3 years under Dodd-Frank are all making it more and more difficult for you not to use a financial advisor. The regulators want you to because they see the benefit of having you use a financial advisor. A financial advisor will usually charge you a fixed fee, and it depends on the type of bond that you're issuing. For example, if you're doing a general obligation bond, a financial advisor will usually charge you somewhere between $1 and $2 per thousand. So if you're doing a $10 million issue, it's going to cost you between $10,000 and $20,000 for the financial advisor. If you're issuing that $10 million bond and repaying it over a 20-year period, 10 basis points change in interest rate means hundreds of thousands of dollars to you over the life of the bond. The much bigger weight is the interest rate. So if your financial advisor can save you interest from the underwriter, they more than pay for themselves. I'll just give you an example that happened yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. Yesterday was Monday, right? I hired an underwriter to do a deal up in Wasatch County area. And we took bids from underwriters like you should through an RFP process. And we scored them before we saw their fees, and we knew who was winning, but they weren't the low fee. In fact, they were on the high end. So I simply called that underwriter up and said, we like your proposal. Are you willing to work for the average fee that was bid across all underwriters? And they said, sure. That phone call saved $36,000 on that transaction. That's about what my fee is. So yeah, financial advisors pay for themselves. Unless the deal is really small or short, then you can call into question that fee. But they're there to help you to get the best deal possible. Other questions? Have I gone too long already, Adam? Okay. I would just encourage you all to use the GFOA website. That's the Government Finance Officers Association, a group of finance officers in Canada and the U.S. that put out position papers and help. I love their thinking about debt. I agree with all of it. So if you go to their website, GFOA, you'll find some best practice papers, write-ups about hiring financial advisors, about hiring underwriters, about which method of sale you ought to use, negotiated or competitive or a direct purchase. They've got some great position papers. I agree with all of it. It's all very good thinking. They know what they're talking about. So it's a great source for you if you go into a bond issue. Any other questions about bonds that I can answer for you? Has it been really boring?